Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by a special guest. His name is Kal-El, just like the Kryptonian Superman, right?
Yes, sir. That's me.
Yeah. If you don't know how I met him, I actually met him at like the MMA gym that I train at. Funny enough. So how are you doing today, Kal-El?
Doing very well. Another beautiful day. A little under the weather, but getting through. Getting through. How about you?
Well, okay. It's nice, nice, nice. I remember you telling me the story of how you got your name.
Yeah. My dad's a giant comic book nerd. He always wanted to name me something in regards to that, but he first he knew my mom was gonna shoot down whatever name he went for first. So he offered Thor up, and she, like he knew, shot that shit down. But he was like, "Okay, Cal." She's like, "Okay, yeah, I know I can't say no twice." So I said, "You could choose. We'll give him Cal." So we got Kal-El.
Okay, okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. So, what's actually interesting that you have a bunch of swords in your room that I just noticed.
Yes. Most of them are not actually sharp, they're just trainer swords. A couple of them are sharp or were sharp, though most of them have been used pretty heavily and been worked down. I don't know if you can see the dowel over here right next to the mirror. They're actually,
Okay.
if you like see them, they've got like giant chunks taken out of like the blades
Oh,
from
really?
using sparring, just drilling and stuff like that.
Okay, so you actually like train with the swords and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Swords, sticks, spears, staffs, all that kinds of stuff.
Okay, okay,
Even a little bit of not too much, but a little bit of firearm stuff.
okay. So you're mostly into like ancient like weaponry.
Yeah. Not necessarily ancient weapons, but historical martial arts in general, historical Asian martial
Okay,
arts, historical European martial arts, historical African martial arts, whatever it is. I just really like getting into like the history, the origins of stuff, how martial arts move from country to country, how they evolve from century to century, stuff like that.
okay. It's interesting. Do you have any like I guess like a weapon that you like is your favorite basically?
Um, I have two probably weapons that are my favorites. Um, One of them, unfortunately, I think of myself mostly as a kung fu martial artist, like a Chinese martial artist. Um, so most of these weapons are Chinese stuff, kung fu weapons.
Okay.
But I practice a bit of iaido, which is the Japanese art of drawing the sword, and so you use a katana for that. And so I only
Okay.
have one katana. I'm not like super duper into like fancy katanas and like getting like all the nice subas and the nice wraps and like, oh, katana is the best sword in the world. But it's one of my favorite swords to practice with. It's one of my favorite swords to use and to like research. My other favorite sword would be the Jan, which is not a very popular, well-known sword. Are you familiar with it?
Wait, what'd you say the name was?
Jian, Jian.
Nah. Is it similar to the katana or
No, it's actually it's similar in size traditionally, like
okay.
historically, but it's different in a number of ways. Number one, the katana is typically swept a little bit, not like too much, right? But it's a little bit curved. The
Okay.
Jan is a straight sword. It's a double-sided.
Oh,
Um, from what I have researched, it was predominantly used in the Chinese military for armored soldiers with a shield. So they would like use the shield to defend themselves, and they'd use the Jan to like poke holes in the armor or like around the armor. Whereas like a more similar weapon to the katana in Chinese martial arts would be the Dao, or more accurately the Miao Dao. Right, the Dao is like we were saying earlier. Like Dao just means basically knife. So it's like a one-sided sword. It's like if
okay.
you have like a butter knife, it's a dao, right? If you have
Oh,
a big like saber, it's a dao also, but like it's a different type of dao, obviously, right?
so you call
Uh,
it if it's like a one-sided like blade, I guess.
yeah,
You would call that a dao.
yes,
Okay. That makes
yeah.
sense.
And if it's two-sided, it's a jan. Just basically, regardless, if it's a
Okay.
dagger, if it's a long sword, if it's like a spear. I believe arrows are also called jan. I could be mistaken. I'm studying Mandarin right now, so I should know, but
Oh, okay.
I don't.
It's interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, the Meow Dao is actually uh, because kind of stolen from the Japanese. the Japanese pirates were kind of harassing the Chinese for a little while, and they had these really awesome swords. They weren't really katana; they were nodachi, which is just like big katana.
Okay.
Um, and so she's like, "Oh, that's awesome! We gotta steal those." So they basically just took the design and made Miao Dao.
Okay. You know what's actually funny? I do have I have one katana myself.
Oh,
Funny enough.
nice! Heck
Yeah.
yeah! Heck yeah!
And I also have like one European sword. It's like a smaller European sword. It's like a
Nice.
Spaniard sword.
I want to get more into European swords. They're really interesting and really cool to study the history. For some reason, though, anytime I go to get a sword, I always just like Chinese. It's a
Yeah.
problem. I need to fix it.
That's funny. So, you know what's actually very interesting? I don't know how much you know about like ancient like warfare, but like
I'm trying to learn more. I wouldn't consider myself any level of expert.
have you read like The Art of War by any chance?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I read that. I've actually got a bound and a traditional Chinese bound version over here,
Oh, really? Okay.
right next to my bed. Yeah. Got that. I've got like a United States Army training manuals for like old historical manuals, stuff like that. I've got old military like Qing Dynasty. Oh, actually, recently just picked up these 400-year-old Qing Dynasty, or I think Ming Dynasty training manuals for swords and stuff like that. So
Okay.
uh, ancient warfare is something I definitely want to get more into, but don't know too much about at the moment, unfortunately.
One thing that I've like researched at least is like how at least the ancient Greeks that I don't you obviously know of Alexander the Great, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I believe if I'm not mistaken, his army was called the Phalanx, right? And they would have like
Mm.
these super ultra long like spears
Yeah,
at like bay, right? And of course it would be like a line of like a lot of people, right?
yeah, I
And
love
the
that
person when they put down a spear, so even if like the really long end breaks, it's like they still have like a bunch of spears before they can actually get to the person.
for sure, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Another area like it's kind of built into like that. We're talking about having like a large group of soldiers, right, with a long range weapon, so that you can keep your enemy at bay. And even if maybe like one spear breaks or goes down or something, you've got just like the mass to cover you instead. Something that I'm a little bit into is historical mounted archery,
Oh, really? Okay.
and you get like different tactics that you can find on that. Like something that, at least from my studies, it appears that the Mongols were like really good horse archers, but they didn't need to do a whole lot of like blitzing in and out and like shoot, 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 shoot fast, go away.
Yeah.
They could take like larger groups and kind of like move just out of range of whatever you could do and just kind of harass you, basically until you were available enough for them to go in and do whatever else they needed to do. Whereas, like, are you familiar with Comanche archery?
Well, is that like
Uh,
different from regular archery or?
yeah, yeah, Comanches. Well, mounted archery. One thing that they do really different, apparently, from what I've seen. Like, maybe this is totally wrong, and they didn't actually do this, but um, typically when you notch a bow, right, you're bringing the arrow here and notching it. Yeah.
Yeah.
In a mounted archery, if you do that, because it's up like this, the bow is going to be bouncing. So you actually
Okay.
need a counter force of notching the bow this way, so that you're pressing up into the arrow and down, so they're notching onto the bow like this. So one thing that does is it makes it a lot more stable, but it makes it a little weird and it makes it a lot faster for you to do it. So Comanches would actually not specialize in accuracy necessarily with their bows, but rapidity. They would have competitions of like, okay, not who can shoot the smallest target from the farthest away, but let's see who can shoot an arrow up and then shoot as many more arrows as they can before that first arrow gets down.
Okay.
So it's like rapid fire, point blank
Machine gun type.
machine gun fire, like which is a super cool, different approach. Like, okay, Mongo's like, yeah, we've got a lot of people, we've got arrows, you can just stick on the outside and just kind of poke you guys out until you're done. Whereas the Comanches are like, we're not that good at aiming, but we're super good at shooting fast. So we're just gonna blitz into you guys and point blank shoot you with like three arrows and keep moving. It's like that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, what I do know of the Mongols is that, like you said, they would like uh they wouldn't necessarily blitz you, but they would fight from like a distance, and like,
Mhm.
I guess like in a way they would kind of like scatter you
Right, 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 right.
with arrows. Yeah, which is why they probably were so like successful. Like,
Surely, surely.
yeah.
Speaking of the Mongols and success, are you familiar with Boch at all?
Now, who's that?
Boch is named after Buri Boch, who's a traditional Mongolian folk hero.
Yeah.
But Boch itself is the art of Mongolian wrestling.
Oh, okay.
And it's done in Inner Mongolia, I believe. It's done with leather jacket. In Outer Mongolia, I think they use like cotton and rope. Um, but it's really cool because the rules are very similar to sumo and judo in that you have these specific grips and you can grip any way you want. And your goal is to throw your opponent. And like sumo, any part of their body that touches the ground, they will be considered out, but there's no time limit. So you've actually had, I don't know if right now it's going on, but in the past few years, in the past few cycles in the Olympics, you've actually had quite a few Mongolians coming in from bulk, switching over to judo, competing and doing like really, really well. I believe a Mongolian who came over who had never competed in judo before actually won gold
Oh, really?
in
Oh,
judo
wow.
Olympics from Boch, uh, which is really cool. I really like studying these like weirder folk wrestling styles. Like
Yeah.
again,
They're like lesser known.
for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. What's something that interesting you mentioned like before is like I think you were saying you were studying like Mandarin, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really I think language is a beautiful thing. Like written language as well as spoken language. It can come in um they can express itself in so many different ways, right? Like um just like you speak Urdu, right? And so that's
Yeah.
written with abjad, right? And I predominantly speak English, right? That's written with alphabet, right? And you
Yeah.
have Mandarin, which is written with what is it? Uh, I'm blanking on the term for whatever it is, what the writing system is called, right? But it's written with symbols as opposed to these characters which encode actual like sound value, right? So like
Yeah.
I'm learning Mandarin right now, and so like sometimes I'll look at something and I'll read it and be like, oh, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I know a little bit of Mandarin, you know, like I know the tones that are in this word, like I can recognize, I know exactly what's being said here, right? And other times I can look at like a page and I'll be like, I just I have nowhere to start. Like it's not that I can't like even if I learned like the Urdu script, right? I could with an accent recreate the sounds a little bit, you know? Like I could probably get across, at least I could like read out the sounds and you could probably be like, oh, okay, he's saying this poorly, but he's saying
Yeah.
this, right? But with Mandarin, I can look at a page and have absolutely zero idea of how to realize like the phonetic content of it, you know?
Oh, really?
And also it can be like, okay, not only do I not know how this sounds or what it means, but because it's not written out like a word here or a word here, it's just kind of like it's a collection of different radicals. It's really hard to search for what does this mean.
Yeah.
They're kind of just like, oh no, I don't know what that means. I'll
You
have
know
to.
what's really really cool that you mentioned is how when you're reading Chinese you don't know if it's phonetical or not, right?
Right.
And one thing I realized is that when you speak English, right? And then let's if you speak another language, and you'll realize how inconsistent English actually is.
For
It's
sure.
like grammatical rules. But most of the languages, just in general, tend to be a lot more consistent.
100%. 100%.
That's what I realized. And it's like, I guess in a way, it's kind of like, I don't know if I should say it's a flaw of the English language, but one thing, it's like so inconsistent that now when I think about it, it's like it kind of makes sense why some people will struggle with learning English because the rules just don't add up all the time.
For sure, for sure. And that the funny that you bring that up, that's actually part of the reason why I started learning Mandarin as opposed to some other languages. Strangely enough, I'm actually finding learning Mandarin right now significantly easier than I was finding learning things like Spanish in school. Because of,
Really?
like you mentioned, not because the rules are inconsistent, like the rules of Spanish pronunciation are pretty uh, clear, right? There's not too
Yeah.
much questions. There's like dialectical variation, we also like in my like variation of Spanish, say azul, right? Whether in like Spain, Spanish, say azul, right? It's like slight
Yeah.
variations here and there with pronunciation, but like it's basically the same. Um, but they have a lot of conjugation in languages, like I ran, like you're running, he did run, we will run, like all of these like different changes that you can do, like correr, corremos, corren,
Yeah.
corro, right? Corra, right? Different like conjugations, and they all mean different. They won't mean the same thing, but different things like in the context, right? Whereas with Mandarin Chinese, there is much less of that. There's no like I, me distinction, I, me, my, right? You, your. And there's also something that I find is really cool. Like, you know how in English, you can say, like, you can mean like you singular, or it can mean you multiple, right?
Yeah.
Um, in Chinese, they simplify that a lot, right? It's like in Chinese, in Mandarin, you would be ni, right? And if you say you multiple, ni men, right? So it's like it takes that ambiguity out of what you're talking about, right? You're saying like me, or you can say if you say like me, but a lot, you're saying we, um, or like I don't know. I'm probably gonna go off a little tangent. Like it's really cool how different languages handle different things. Like there are some uh, was Aboriginal languages, like in what is it, Oceania, right? Where they do not have like left, right, forward, backward stuff like this.
Yeah.
They do cardinal directions at all times, right? So
Really?
like it's like okay, this is my west hand and this is my east hand, and I'm looking north and I'm like not looking south, right? And like now this is my south hand and this is my north hand, and right, this kind of weird stuff is keeping track of it all the time.
You know, it's interesting to mention that because at least in Urdu, it's like the word for left isn't really left, it's opposite.
Huh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really
So it's like
interesting.
you'll have right, um, which in Urdu is like sida, right? And then um and then for left it would technically be uta, which means like left, right?
Mhm.
Which it literally translates to opposite.
That's so cool. What the
Yeah.
heck? I like it whenever there are things like that. Whenever I was learning the alphabet
Yeah.
in Spanish, this is a little bit different. This is kind of like another interesting language fact that maybe you didn't know. You probably did though. Um, in Spanish, the alphabet, right? There are a lot of different letters, and like they're pronounced similarly to a lot of other Romance languages letters, right? Um, but the letter Y is pronounced Y, right? Um, which I was like, when I learned, I was like, oh, that's a cool sounding letter. But I'd never clicked in my mind that the reason why it's called Y is because it's the letter epsilon, right? Boom, boom, which is the Greek letter for E. And Y literally means it's the Greek E. So like whenever like you're getting words that are using that predominantly, it's like showing the Greek borrowing process, you know?
Oh, okay. That's actually kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like I thought that was like, oh, that's cool. Y is Y. But I was like, oh, Y is actually it's literally called Greek E. Like,
Do you
that's
know what like etymology is? That's basically what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I very much enjoy studying like origins of language, where words get borrowed from, how they
Yeah.
evolve over time, how like pronunciation changes.
Yeah.
For sure, for
I
sure.
really like it, especially for like words that have like really ancient meaning.
Certainly, certainly.
If you trace it back long enough, right? And I find that very interesting how it like evolved, especially if like, like you said, like a culture borrows it from another culture, right? And that like because they won't be able to pronounce it the same way that it was originally pronounced, right?
Certainly.
And then that culture takes it, and then another culture takes it, and then it gets even more like I guess you could say butchered, right? And then
Right,
eventually
right,
become
right.
like modern way of saying it, at least in that language.
For sure. Speaking of this whole process, a really interesting thing that I learned recently. I'll lead into it. Do you know how to say tea in Urdu?
Yeah,
Can you tell me?
yeah, it's chai.
Okay, cool. I assumed so. Um, Really interesting fact is that universally there are basically only two words for tea, and they both originate in China.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the northern word for tea in Chinese is cha, and the
Oh,
southern word for it is tea. And so, depending on where your country in, related with China and where they interacted and where they got tea from, that influenced where your country, where your language got their name for tea. And so, like
really?
basically, like you have like Spanish, you have te, in like English, you have tea, right? In Urdu, you have chai, right?
Yeah.
Cha. There are lots of countries, I believe, that use chai and different variations of that, right? Portuguese is one of the rare Latin languages, or I think they have cha also.
Oh, really? It's actually kind of interesting. I didn't know that. Like
Yeah,
speaking
yeah,
about,
yeah, for sure. Like, and I didn't know that. Like, I always knew like China had a big tea culture, but I
yeah,
assumed that like I know tea probably sprung up everywhere independently, but the earliest records we have of like written down of like records of tea are from China. Um,
oh,
I just find
yeah. I
it
think
so
it
cool that like
originated from there, right? If I'm not
yeah,
mistaken. Right?
yeah, I think so. But I was gonna say crazy. The whole world uses this country's words for this stuff. It's like what? That's crazy.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy, honestly. You know, it's actually kind of interesting. I don't know if you know this, but maybe the reason why is because some people might not know this, but Kung Fu actually, like, if you trace it long back enough,
Mm.
it actually originates from India, believe it or not.
Right,
Yeah,
clarinet, right? I probably
yeah,
butchered that. I'm sure. Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, no, but yeah, that's exactly where it comes from. Like the martial arts you just named.
yeah, yeah. I really I need to look more into that. Like you I don't know why, but whenever I like so many times when you trace martial arts back, they have roots in India. Not just kung fu, but like Muay Thai also.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like a lot of ancient martial arts, Eastern martial arts have roots in India. It seems to find like if you go back far enough.
Yeah.
So that's definitely
One
an
thing
area
that
where
I
I need to
found
look
is
more.
a lot of these like Asian martial arts, they do like originate back to India in a way
Yeah,
because funny enough, that's where actually Buddhism actually started from.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's I think if I'm not mistaken, the whole Shaolin myth is or the whole Shaolin story is the Bodhidharma coming from India to Shaolin Temple to like teach the monks the postures that they would eventually turn into Shaolin Kung Fu, right?
I'm not sure familiar with the myths, but I do know that there was like a so like there was like this one king, his name was like Ashoka the Great, and he sent like these missionaries like all across the world, and obviously to China, right? And I forgot the name of the exact like priest that went there, but like yeah, he's famous for introducing it into like the I guess like more Eastern Asian world.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that since speaking of Buddhism, I believe that in Kung Fu, Shaolin Temple is actually not just a mecca for martial arts, but it's also, I believe, the mecca for Chan Buddhism, Zen Buddhism. That is the
Probably,
origin point.
yeah, yeah, because it's I guess like Buddhism of like I actually had this talk with like someone else
Oh, very
like
cool.
talking about like history and stuff and how the Greek art style actually kind of influenced into India and that's art
Hmm.
style like I don't know if you ever seen the statue of Hercules and Buddha. There's a
Hmm.
statue, right? And because of that statue and other art styles, right, that actually made they actually made their way into China, and that's
Huh.
why like you'll see like I guess like a somewhat of an influence even like today.
That's really interesting. That's cool.
Yeah, I actually just remembered right now is we're talking about tea, but I don't know
Yeah.
if you know like the origin of coffee.
I don't.
Okay, so usually, I mean, there's a debate on like where coffee like
For
came
sure.
from, but it's either Ethiopia or Yemen, right?
Hmm.
Right. I mean, I think the plant itself originates from Ethiopia, but where it was actually invented, I personally believe that it was in Yemen,
Hmm.
due to like the sources, right? So from Yemen, they would call it, if I'm not mistaken, in Arabic, call it kahwa, right? And then from kahwa, it like traveled obviously to like Persia, right? And
Hmm.
like the Turks were really into tea, right?
Hmm.
But they would pronounce it as, I believe, kava, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. And then there was like some war, I think it was like the Battle of Vienna or something. And like the Turks introduced it into Europe. And from Europe, I think the Hungarians or some other European group, I forgot. But they like pronounced it like differently. And then from there, it became cafe that we got coffee.
That's so cool. I did not know
Yeah.
that. Very, very, very interesting. I always like learning like origins of like little modern things that we have today that were like, oh yeah, that's just coffee, that's just tea. It's like, no, actually, that goes back a long way. Like it's super far away.
Yeah. No, it's
Uh,
like words are, I guess, like one of the few things, especially if you know like the etymology behind it. It's one of the few things that connect us with the ancient world.
certainly, certainly. Speaking of words connecting us, and I think you brought up Hungary a second ago. Uh,
Yeah,
Hungarian is actually a language isolate in Europe, if I'm not mistaken. Meaning like it does not have it's not related to the languages around it.
really.
It's actually an agglutinative language, if I'm not mistaken, which means that instead of parsing together different words to make a sentence that like conveys what you're meaning, you have a lot of prefixes and suffixes and infixes that you combine to make really long words that convey your meaning. So you get like these really just like short sentences with very small amounts of words, but just these just ginormous giant groups of characters.
I mean, I'm not familiar with like the Hungarian language, but based off of what you're telling me, I'm assuming it has pretty long words.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay.
Kind of like a. Have you ever seen that Welsh? I think it is a really long Welsh word. It's like that. It's the name of a place.
Oh yeah, I know Welsh. Yeah.
Oh, tight, tight, tight. I don't remember what it's called. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but it's like the world's longest place name. I remember
Oh,
the last
I
three
think I've
words
seen
like
memes.
go go
Yeah.
go or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting how some names can be burial.
Certainly, certainly.
Yeah, I know you're studying like Mandarin, obviously, but are there what languages do you plan on studying?
Um, I would like to. I'm studying Mandarin right now as like a kind of a compromise. I wanted to study Cantonese, so hopefully after I get better at Mandarin, I get semi almost kind of fluent maybe. I'll try to push my way into Cantonese. Um, I've thought about studying Thai. Um, what scared me off of Thai until recently is that, again, Thai is a tonal language. And up until I made the plunge to studying Mandarin, I had been very hesitant to study tonal languages just because I'm not used to that. English is not a tonal language, Spanish is not a tonal language. Um, so I'm just, and because it's not necessarily the tones that have scared me off of Thai, but it's the fact that it has nine tones and that they are pitch specific. So, like in Mandarin, there are five tones. One of those tones is an empty tone, so you can just say ma. It's just empty. You don't have to worry about the inflection, right? And then the other four are, for the most part, just rough uh, gestures, right? You have like your high neutral tone ma, you have your high falling tone ma, your low rising tone ma, and your falling rising tone ma, right? And ma, right? Just empty. But it doesn't matter what notes you're on, really. if you want to learn Cantonese or Thai, it does matter. So you're like ma or ma, right? Two different words.
Really? Okay.
Even though they're the same tone gesture, because they had a different tone start and different tone end, it changes the tone.
So it's kind of interesting how complex languages can be sometimes.
Certainly, certainly. And I think that like they sacrifice all the conjugation of like correr, corrando, corro, corras, corre, right? With just tones, like that, the different, like the brain is spent doing other things. Speaking of language complexity, I don't know if you're aware of Tibetan. It's really strongly related to Sanskrit, and they use a lot of historical spelling, so a lot of stuff that calls back to Sanskrit. But it's written like in Sanskrit, but it's not pronounced like in Sanskrit.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um, but I've heard it, and it's one of like the weirdest, like most inconsistent, like spelling to pronunciation languages in the world.
Really?
Because it's super like historical, the way it's spelled is ancient, 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 ancient.
Hold on.
Um,
What I
but
do know is that like Hindi is like the script is based off of Sanskrit.
yeah, 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 yeah. I'm not sure if the Tibetan is like based off of script or if like they try to hold really to the original script. I don't know, but I've heard a hypothesis that because they're living in that higher altitude and they're getting used to living at that higher altitude, their brains are better at processing the oxygen up there, so they have more brain power to use for a more difficult language. I don't know how true that is, but I've heard it.
Interesting. I don't know how true that is, but I do know that living up there can like improve oxygen intake if I'm not mistaken.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's actually kind of interesting that I heard that ancient languages are more complex than like newer languages. I
Mhm.
found that very interesting because you would assume that newer languages would be more complex, but it's actually the other way around.
Right, right,
Because
right.
humans tend to simplify things.
Certainly, certainly,
Yeah,
certainly. That's like I don't know if you've ever looked back and like I've never tried to learn Latin, but I've like given a couple goes at like familiarizing myself a little bit with Latin, and man, it's hard. There's like
yeah,
even more conjugation, so much more conjugation. It's difficult, and like a Greek also like there's a lot more emphasis on like vowel length and vowel stress. Like I don't know if they have this in Urdu, but like they have it a little bit in I think Spanish. Like uh what's a good one? Perro versus perro, right? Perro,
oh,
perro, perro, right? Um, uh, but like we have to elongate a vowel or shorten a vowel to change the meaning of a word.
yeah. I don't. I can't think of a. There probably is. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now.
For sure, for sure. I hate it when that happens.
Yeah,
Especially whenever I started learning languages and studying languages more, that started happening to me all the time. Where I started going, "What's the word? What's the word I'm thinking of in the language that I speak?" I
yeah,
suddenly don't know how to speak the language that I speak.
yeah. No, I feel you. Yeah, it's one thing that makes me wonder because we're talking about Latin and Sanskrit, right? Which are technically like two languages that are dead, but we still know how they're spoken, right?
Right,
But it makes me wonder how languages that are dead, but we don't even know how they were pronounced or anything. Like,
right.
for example, like the ancient Egyptian like hieroglyphs and how they might have spoken at some point, right?
Certainly, certainly. Or like drawing it just because I'm a China nerd, drawing it back to like the Chinese characters, right? Go back far enough, and you're just like, how is this? There's literally no phonetic information in this. They're like, how do I
Yeah,
pronounce this? And like the country, like I'm sure it's like similar to this with like India because it's such a massive country. Like things are pronounced differently everywhere, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
The funny thing in India, I think it's the one place with the most languages.
I wouldn't be
if I'm not
surprised. Yeah,
mistaken.
that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's like what like over like I could be wrong here on the number, but I think it's like over 800. I think yeah, it's like
That's
crazy.
crazy. That's so
Yeah,
cool. I wonder, like, I wonder if there are people there that like. I wonder how many they speak. You know, like how many is like the average? I'm sure like just one or two probably, but I'm sure there are some people who have learned disparate ones. Like I don't know, like I have an acupuncturist named Frank Liu, and he was a surgeon back in China. But then he when he immigrated here, his credentials did not allow him to practice medicine over here, so he just did traditional Chinese medicine. But he speaks like four or five or six just Chinese languages or dialects aside from English and Spanish or whatever. It's like
yeah,
I'm sure there are some crazy polyglots over there that just know
yeah.
everything.
No, that's true. Yeah, yeah, like learning languages is like an amazing thing, honestly.
Certainly.
I've personally not looked into Eastern Asian like languages,
Mhm.
but I've looked into like I guess you could call it like the Middle Eastern or like that area of like India and like I obviously like some Latin languages,
Certainly.
but I just thought it was way too complex.
For sure, man. That's why I started learning Mandarin because like, oh, all these romance languages are so hard. I need something
Yeah,
easier.
yeah. No, I'm sure like for someone that has like no idea, like I guess like a language like Urdu might be really hard, right?
Right.
But like it's just that I happen to speak it, so something like I guess like Farsi or Arabic would be a little easier to understand for me, or like
Certainly.
you know, like
Yeah,
if I wanted to learn it, right?
that'd be cool, man.
Yeah,
Just start collecting languages. Because like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are quite a lot of languages around the globe that use the Arabic script, right? Like it's not
yeah,
just like classical Arabic and Urdu, right? But there are like a quite a few like countries and languages that use it.
yeah. It's all like based on that script.
Right, right.
Yeah, but it's been a real great honor having you, and I'd love to do another session.
For sure, for sure. It's been an honor being on, brother. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I actually enjoyed this.
Yeah, me as well, brother.
Yeah,
Uh,
but
so
uh, for everyone that enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe, hit that bell notification, support the channel, and until next time, peace.